Oh, I just did. Okay. Hi, folks. I'm going to demonstrate for you a technique for using a shadowy underpainting, kind of a loose underpainting, in a contrasting color to the what's called local color that you're eventually going to add. So if my subject is the apple, the local color is the reds and the golds and greens, things that, you know, that's the real surface color. But I'm going to use a contrasting color, a complementary color even, for my underpainting so that I can draw the shadows that way. So first step is I'm going to make a pencil sketch of the apple, but I'm going to make it very, very light. And when you guys are doing this, I don't want you to spend more than like a couple of minutes making this sketch. Don't go crazy and make a super detailed contour drawing of the apple, because that's not really what I want you to concentrate on, and it's really not necessary. So hopefully you won't even be able to necessarily even see the contour drawing that I made just there. And I'm also going to outline some of the areas that are going to be the brightest highlight, because I want to make sure that I avoid them when I start to add the shadows and the darker colors. So I don't want to do a lot of, you know, putting pigment around that area, because I want it to be the white of the paper, and then whatever I do put on that is going to be very light, like a wash. Okay, so on my palette I had a like a scarlet or crimson hue, and I had some medium yellow, and I had a phthalo blue. I never know if I'm pronouncing that right. And then I had some green. I can't remember the kind of green that I had, but just some basics. And I mixed the red and the blue, and I'm going to mix it even more so that I have like almost a grayish kind of little hints of purple, but it's kind of a neutral. And that's going to be the color I'll use for my underpainting. And I'm using, I'm actually going to switch brushes because I want to use a little bit of like a fatter, fluffier, round brush. And I'll come back to that thinner one. Okay. So now I'm just looking for areas of shadow. And I can even get through sort of some gestural marks. I can get the striated color that the apple shows. You know, there's this kind of stripy effects on the apple in red and purple, and those are sort of indicative of the apple's form, since it's this really rounded form. So I can get a little of that kind of effect too. And definitely in this little hollow, there's a fair amount of shadow. Okay, so super basic application of that wash, just to kind of figure out what's light, what's dark. Now I want to accentuate some of the darks even a little bit more. And I think I'm going to make this like a bluer, greener color, because I do want to experiment with how the red, that local color, when I put a wash of the red on top of the underpainting, which is a complement, then I think I'm going to get a richly dark value with some color complexity, as opposed to putting down like a just plain old gray. So in the areas that are really dark, I'm going to put some of this greener, bluer effect. And you can see that because the paper was wet, the color is spreading really nicely. That's what you want from the wash. There's reflected light in this one little area popping up from the table, so I'm not going to go over that with as dark of a wash. I feel like I'm having my Bob Ross moment with you guys. It's very special. Okay, so got a darker area around that base, and there is a cast shadow under there. I'm leaving like a tiny little outline between where I'm painting this cast shadow and where I'm painting I'm leaving a little bit of an edge between the apple and that cast shadow, because as we mentioned, we were talking about wet into wet. If you wet the paper, the color is just going to run into that area. And I want to make sure that there's a little bit of a distinction between those two things, the cast shadow and the apple itself. I'm also starting to use a little bit less of a wash as I'm trying to make some definition and show that the bottom part of the apple is really hidden from light. So I want that to be darker, and therefore I don't want it to be as washy, because the wash is what will just bring some of those up for some cross contours. Okay. I get the darkest value when I'm combining real opposites. So for that little divot that's really dark in there, I mixed the red, the green, and the blue, and I got that much darker tone. I suppose I can bring down here too. And I think it'll be fun as you're painting your little sketches for you to try to be sort of gestural and expressive, not just think that you've got to sort of slavishly make it look exact, at least for these early stages. Like, try to see if you can just be expressive about the form of the object. Okay, so I'm actually gonna blast this a tiny bit with the hairdryer, just because I don't want this underpainting to stay so wet. If I do that, then whatever I put on top of that, it's gonna mix right away instead of having like some transparency and some layering. So I'm gonna pause.